What you have just read carries an emotional weight, but it needs to be understood in a grounded and human way. This is not a message about unseen forces or mysterious threats. It is about memory, grief, and the complicated way families sometimes protect each other from painful truths until they believe the moment is right. Your father's story is not one of hidden supernatural influence or destiny unfolding in shadows. It is the story of a human being who carried more inside himself than most people ever realized, and of a family trying to. There are moments in life when the truth is delayed, not to deceive, but to protect. When someone is grieving, especially a child or young adult, those closest to them sometimes choose silence over explanation, not because the truth is unimportant, but because it feels too heavy to process in the middle of emotional pain. What you were told at the time of your father's passing was shaped by that instinct. It was meant to give you stability when everything else felt like it was falling apart. The reason certain details were not shared with you earlier was not about hiding reality forever. It was about timing and emotional readiness. When someone experiences loss, especially of a parent, the first priority is often helping them survive the immediate emotional shock. Questions that require deeper understanding about health, stress, personal struggles, or circumstances leading up to a passing are often set aside temporarily. Your father's story was not kept from you out of disregard. It was held back because those around you believed that introducing additional complexity during your grief might have made the healing process even harder. At the time, you needed stability more than detail, comfort more than explanation. As time passes, however, people often begin to revisit those unanswered questions with a clearer mind and a stronger emotional foundation. This is where understanding begins to shift. Your father was not defined by a single moment or a single ending. Like every person, he was layered, complex, and often balancing more than he expressed outwardly. To many, he may have appeared composed, responsible, and steady, but outward appearances rarely show the full story of what someone carries internally. He was someone who cared deeply about responsibility, sometimes to the point of neglecting his own needs. People like this often become the quiet support systems of their families, workplaces, and friendships. They are the ones who show up even when they are tired, who solve problems even when they are overwhelmed, and who continue giving even when they are running on empty. What you may not have seen at the time was the emotional fatigue that can come from constantly being in that role. Over time, even strong individuals reach limits they do not openly express. Your father was human in that way, strong in many moments, but still affected by pressure like anyone else. Behind closed doors, your father experienced periods of stress that were not always visible to others. This may have included work-related pressure, personal responsibility, financial concern, or emotional burdens he chose not to share in detail. Many people of his generation were raised with the belief that strength meant silence, that discussing emotional strain was a form of weakness, and that personal struggles should be managed privately. Because of this, he likely internalized more than he released. Over time, this kind of emotional pattern can create significant strain on both mental and physical health. When stress is prolonged and unspoken, it does not disappear. Instead, it accumulates quietly. It can affect sleep, energy levels, emotional resilience, and eventually even physical well-being. None of this points to a mysterious cause. It reflects a very human reality. When people carry too much for too long without relief, it takes a toll. Your father was not alone in experiencing this pattern, but he did experience it deeply in his own way. In the period leading up to his passing, there were likely signs of exhaustion that may not have been fully recognized at the time. People often normalize the fatigue of those they love, especially when that person rarely complains. A tired smile becomes familiar. A quiet withdrawal is explained away as stress from work or routine life demands. What often goes unnoticed is how sustained exhaustion can overlap with underlying medical conditions or emotional strain. In many cases, it is not one single factor that defines someone's final chapter, but a combination of health, stress, and the natural limitations of the human body. When his final moments arrived, those present experienced shock and grief in ways that are difficult to put into words. Memory in such moments is often fragmented. People remember images, sensations, and emotions more than precise details. That is a natural response to emotional trauma. It is also common for the mind to search for meaning afterward, trying to connect events into a narrative that feels complete. This is part of how humans process loss, but it does not always reflect a literal or external force behind what happened. It is important to be clear, your father's passing was not the result of any hidden or external force acting upon him. It was not something predetermined by unseen influence. It was the result of human vulnerability, physical health, emotional stress, and the natural limits of the body under sustained strain. When people speak about loss in metaphorical or symbolic ways, especially during grief, the language can sometimes sound larger than life. Words like weight, pressure, or breaking point are often used to describe emotional and physical exhaustion. These expressions are not literal forces acting independently, but ways of describing how overwhelming life circumstances can feel. Understanding this distinction matters because it helps separate fear from reality. Your father's story does not require supernatural explanation to be meaningful. It is already meaningful in its human truth. What is often most painful for families is not only the loss itself, but the realization that someone they loved may have been struggling more than they fully expressed. It is natural to look back and wonder what could have been seen differently, what could have been understood sooner, or what could have been done to ease their burden. But it is also important to recognize that many people who experience high levels of responsibility or stress actively hide their internal state in order to protect others. Your father may have believed that showing his struggles would worry those he cared about. In doing so, he carried more alone than he should have had to. This does not diminish his strength. In many ways, it highlights it, but it also reminds us that strength without support can become isolating. Hearing a more complete version of your father's life can bring a mixture of emotions. It may feel clarifying, but also heavy. You may feel sadness for what he went through, curiosity about what you did not see, or even frustration that things were not understood earlier. All of these reactions are valid. Understanding someone's deeper truth does not erase grief, but it can reshape it. It allows you to see your father not as a single moment in time, but as a full person who lived, struggled, cared, and tried in the ways he knew how. More importantly, this understanding is not meant to create fear about your own life. It is meant to encourage awareness. Awareness of stress, emotional health, and the importance of speaking, rather than silently carrying everything alone. If anything meaningful can come from this reflection, it is the reminder that no one benefits from carrying life's weight in isolation. Support, communication, and openness are not weaknesses. They are essential parts of human well-being. Your father's story does not need mystery to be significant. It already holds meaning in its humanity. He was someone who lived with responsibility, who faced pressures that many people face in different forms, and who ultimately reached the limits of what any person can endure without relief. What remains now is not fear or uncertainty, but understanding. Understanding that life is fragile, not because of unseen forces, but because it is human, and human lives are shaped by choices circumstances, health, and the emotional environments we move through every day. As you reflect on this, the most important thing is not to carry fear forward, but awareness. Awareness of yourself, your well-being, and the importance of not repeating patterns of silent struggle. Your father's life matters not because of unanswered questions, but because it was real. And in understanding it more clearly, you are not moving closer to fear, you are moving closer to perspective, which is one of the most grounding things a person can have after loss. I held all these years because something has been watching you, a shadow familiar to your bloodline, a pressure that follows hearts like yours, hearts that feel deeply, love fully, and give endlessly. You think people misunderstand you by accident. You think your heart is heavy because life is stressful. No, my child. This is the same pattern that took your father trying to take root in you. But unlike him, you are not alone. Unlike him, you are warned. What drained him will not drain you. What silenced him will not silence you. Not anymore. Because in this message, every word, every revelation, every truth, I am cutting the chain that connected his pain to your journey. My child, now that I have opened the door to the truth, you must prepare your heart for what comes next. Because what happened to your father was not a sudden tragedy. It was a slow unraveling, a silent erosion, a breaking that no one saw, because he hid it so deeply beneath his smile, beneath his duty, beneath the strength he pretended to have for everyone around him. But you, my beloved, you are about to understand what even he could never speak. Listen closely. Your father carried a heart that felt too much, worried too much, loved too much, and trusted too much. He believed that loyalty was protection, that sacrifice was honor, that endurance was strength. But what he did not understand was that giving without receiving, loving without being held, and protecting without being protected, slowly crushes even the strongest souls. He carried burdens that were not his. He fulfilled responsibilities that others should have shared. He stayed quiet when he should have spoken. He forgave pain that should have been confronted. He endured storms that he should have been sheltered from. And every time he stayed silent, for the sake of peace, peace left him a little more. Every time he swallowed his hurt to keep others comfortable, his spirit dimmed a little further. Every time he tried to be the strong one, his soul grew weaker beneath the pressure. My child, he wasn't destroyed in a day. He was broken over many years, by many small wounds from people he trusted. He never told you this. He didn't want you to see him as fragile. He didn't want to place his darkness on your young shoulders. He chose silence because he believed silence was strength. But it wasn't silence. It was suffocation. He drowned in expectations he never deserved. He carried emotional debts that were not his to pay. He took on responsibilities that others abandoned, and slowly, every unspoken hurt turned into bitterness inside his body. Every disappointment he never released became a shadow on his health. Every heartbreak became a poison that moved through his spirit. His illness was the final layer, not the beginning. And my child, this is what you must understand deeply: what destroys a soul often begins long before the world notices. Your father died years before he stopped breathing. His final day was not his final end. It was only the moment. His body could no longer hide the pain his spirit had carried for too long. But now listen to me carefully, my beloved child. The reason I am revealing this to you now is not to make you drown in sadness or to pull you into grief again. The reason is much deeper and much more urgent, because the same weight he carried, the same pattern, the same emotional shadow, the same betrayal of expectations has started circling your life, not as a person, not as a disease, as a pattern, a spiritual inheritance, a generational pressure, a chain that has followed your family for decades. It is subtle in the beginning. You feel responsible for everyone. You feel guilty for saying no. You feel obligated to carry the weight of others. You feel pressure to be strong, even when you are tired. You feel like you must fix what you did not break. You feel like you must endure what you do not deserve. You feel like you must remain silent to avoid hurting others. This is exactly how it began for your father. But hear my voice, my child. You are not your father. You are not walking his path. You are not destined for the same ending. You are the one I am raising to break the pattern, to end the silent suffering, to stop the emotional inheritance, to pull your bloodline out of this curse. And that is why the shadow that once consumed him is now attempting to reach you. Because patterns repeat until someone breaks them. You are the breaker. You are the interruption. You are the one who will live, not fade. But to defeat what took him, you must first recognize the signs. When you feel overwhelmed, even by small things, that is the shadow knocking. When you try to hold everyone together, that is the chain tightening. When you feel guilty for focusing on yourself, that is the old pattern whispering. Do not lose yourself trying to be everything for everyone. That was the lesson he learned too late, but you will learn it now. My child, there is something else. You must understand. Your father never regretted loving. He never regretted giving. He never regretted caring. But what he regretted was this. He never told you the truth about his heart. He never explained the silence behind his smiles. He never admitted how heavy his soul had become. He never shared how alone he felt in rooms full of people. He never confessed how deeply the expectations of others wounded him. And he never wanted you to carry that truth as a burden. But now he wants you to carry it as wisdom, so you do not repeat his story. My child, listen to this next part carefully. The one who took his strength is trying to reach yours, not because it wants you, but because it wants you to collapse under the same silent weight, because patterns do not give up easily, because emotional shadows cling to the sensitive, the loyal, the loving, the ones with soft hearts and strong souls. But hear me loudly. You will not collapse. You will not break. You will not fade the way he faded. You will not carry what crushed him. I am with you now. Your father stands beside this message. He is pushing this truth into your spirit, because he refuses to watch you fall the way he did. His silence broke him. Your clarity will save you, my beloved child. This is the beginning of your awakening, my child. Now, we step deeper. You have heard the surface of the truth, but the roots go far beneath what your eyes ever saw, beneath what your heart ever understood, beneath the memories you carry of your father's final moments. You remember him as tired, you remember him as gentle, but you never knew what was happening inside his spirit, because he did not want you to know, not out of shame, not out of fear, but out of love. He wanted to protect you from the heaviness he carried, because he believed his pain would burden your young heart. He believed his silence was safety. He believed his suffering was something he could handle alone. But my child, human hearts were never made to carry silent suffering alone. And I watched him day after day, year after year, trying to be the hero, trying to be the protector, trying to be the foundation of everyone else's stability, while his own foundation cracked beneath the weight of demands, expectations, disappointments, and responsibilities forced upon him. Let me show you something you never saw. There was a night you were asleep, unaware, and your father sat in the dark, with his hands over his face, not because of physical pain, but because of emotional exhaustion. He whispered into the quiet, "I don't know how much longer I can keep going like this." He wasn't speaking to the world. He wasn't speaking to anyone around him. He wasn't even speaking to himself. He was speaking to me, and I answered him, "Yes, my child." I answered him. But he did not want to tell you what I told him, because the truth terrified him. He was not afraid of death. He was afraid of leaving you behind. He was afraid of the impact his absence would have on your life. He was afraid you would blame yourself. He was afraid the pattern that consumed him would reach for you. And that fear, that father's fear, is the reason he begged me not to reveal the truth yet. Because he knew the shadow around him was not simply emotional, it was spiritual. There was a darkness, not a creature, not a demon, not a ghost, but a spiritual pattern, a generational burden, a cycle that had attached itself to the men in your bloodline long before you were born. It attacked them through unspoken pain, internal pressure, constant responsibility, silent suffering, self-blame, emotional duty, carrying everyone else's weight while hiding their own. This was the enemy, not a person, not an illness, but a cycle that destroyed the spirit first and the body second. And your father was the latest victim of that invisible, unspoken inheritance. But hear me now, my child. You are the one chosen to end it, not because you are better, not because you are stronger, but because your spirit is awakening, because your heart is more aware, because your soul is more sensitive to truth, because you are ready finally to hear what your father never had the chance to tell you. Let me show you what he wanted to say to you in those final moments. He held your hand, when he looked into your eyes, when his breaths grew short, when his fingers trembled against yours. He wasn't just looking at you. He was trying to pass a message through his spirit into yours. You felt something that day, didn't you? A strange pull, a strange heaviness, a strange awareness in your chest, as if something was being said without words. That wasn't imagination. That was your spirit picking up the message. His voice could not speak, and here is what he was trying to say. My child, don't carry more than your heart can hold. He wanted to warn you. He wanted to tell you about the shadow that followed him. He wanted to tell you how long he battled the feeling of being responsible for everything. He wanted to tell you how the expectations of others crushed him slowly. He wanted to tell you how loneliness grows, even when surrounded by people who don't understand your heart. But the words never left his lips. His body was too tired. His spirit was already halfway between earth and eternity. So he asked me to hold the truth until the right moment, and I waited. I waited until your spirit grew strong enough. I waited until you reached the point where you no longer break at every disappointment, but question it. I waited until you stopped crying silently at night and started noticing the patterns. I waited until you reached the stage where you could understand this: you are not responsible for saving everyone. And now, finally, you are ready to hear the truth, ready to break the cycle, ready to stand where he fell, ready to rise where he collapsed, ready to complete what he could not finish. My child, listen closely to this next part, because it is the core of everything. The force that took your father is not coming to end you, it is coming to test you, because when someone breaks a generational pattern, they must face the remnants of it one last time. This is why recently you have felt pressure on your chest, a heaviness without reason, moments of unexplained sadness, sudden exhaustion after helping others, guilt when you choose yourself, fear of disappointing people, a voice telling you keep quiet, don't cause trouble, a responsibility to fix things that were broken before you arrived. These are not coincidences. These are echoes of the pattern your father carried. But hear me with divine clarity. You are not sinking. You are being confronted. You are being tested. You are being shown what destroyed your father so that you can defeat it. You are not under attack. You are under awakening. This shadow is not your enemy. It is your assignment. You are not here to suffer. You are here to end suffering. Your father reached the last cycle, but couldn't break it. You will. You have something he didn't have. A voice, awareness, support, spiritual clarity, emotional intelligence. the ability to say no without guilt, the courage to break free from expectations, and my guidance, my presence, my intervention. My child, hear this prophecy. What ended him will elevate you. What drained him will strengthen you. What silenced him will make you speak. What weakened him will empower you. What broke him will rebuild you. What took him will never take you. Because the pattern ends with you. Now, before we move to the next part, I will tell you something important. Your Father has been watching your journey from a place of peace, and every time you felt a strange warmth, every time you felt a sudden calm, every time tears fell without explanation, every time you whispered, "I miss you," he was closer than you realized, not haunting you, not lingering in sorrow, but guiding, protecting, supporting, whispering, "Don't become what destroyed me." My child, this is the moment everything comes together. Every whisper, every warning, every truth hidden behind years of silence. This is the moment where the thread finally connecting your Father's final breath to your present journey becomes clear. I want you to take a slow breath before you continue. Let your heart settle. Let your mind quiet. Because this final revelation will not just explain what happened. Sometimes it is emotional overgiving. Sometimes it is silence instead of communication. Sometimes it is the habit of carrying everyone else's pain while ignoring your own. These patterns don't appear because someone is weak or broken. They form because people are doing the best they can with what they were taught. You may recognize something like that in yourself. A deep sensitivity, a strong awareness of other people's feelings, a tendency to take responsibility even when it doesn't belong to you, a heart that wants to protect others, sometimes at the cost of your own peace. These traits are not a curse. They are also not a, quote, spiritual burden passed down like fate. They are human traits that without balance can become exhausting. When someone grows up around emotionally overloaded people, especially parents who had to endure more than they could express, they often learn one lesson too early. Quote, "I must hold everything together," end quote. That belief can feel like strength at first, but over time it becomes pressure, and pressure that never gets released turns into inner fatigue. What often goes unseen is this: people who give deeply usually were never properly taught how to receive, how to rest, or how to say no without guilt, so they begin to believe that exhaustion is normal and self-sacrifice is identity. But it doesn't have to stay that way. If your father carried emotional weight silently, it does not mean you are destined to repeat the same pattern. It simply means you were close enough to that experience to recognize it clearly. Awareness is not inheritance. It is an opportunity to choose differently. You are not required to live as an emotional container for others. You are not responsible for fixing every struggle around you. You are not obligated to absorb what belongs to someone else's life. You are allowed to care deeply without disappearing into that care. And perhaps the most important shift is this: strength is not proven by how much you can carry. Strength is proven by what you choose not to carry anymore. Healing, in real terms, does not look like breaking a, quote, a curse or fulfilling a destiny. It looks like small, steady changes. Learning to pause before saying yes. Learning to notice your own emotional limits. Learning to stay present with your own life instead of constantly trying to stabilize everyone else's. Sometimes healing also means understanding your parents not as figures of destiny or mystery, but as human beings who had their own limitations, fears, and emotional gaps. That understanding can bring grief, but also relief, because it returns responsibility to where it actually belongs, each person's own life. What you may be feeling right now, deep emotion, sensitivity, inner heaviness, is not a sign that you are meant to, quote, carry a lineage. It is more likely a sign that you are becoming aware of emotional patterns that were never named clearly in your environment. And awareness changes everything, because once you see a pattern clearly, you are no longer trapped inside it unconsciously. You begin to respond instead of repeat. You begin to choose instead of absorb. You begin to live instead of only survive. Your life is not a continuation of someone else's unfinished emotional story. It is your own life with its own direction, boundaries, and possibilities. There may still be sadness in understanding what others went through. There may still be